If Ashland is, as former mayor Dick Gillis was fond of proclaiming, the center of the universe, then for Randolph-Maconites, Boydton is Mecca. Not only is this where the college began, but it is where it operated for its first 36 years, the period which gave Randolph-Macon its unique distinction as America's oldest continuous Methodist college. During these 36 years, several significant events occurred in the college's life and involved prominent persons who passed through its halls. For example, one of these events was the first visit to the college by an incumbent president of the United States, John Tyler, in 1841, who visited Randolph-Macon to address the Washington and Franklin Literary Societies in the college chapel. Another event was the development of the first course in modern English language instruction in America by Randolph-Macon's first professor of languages, Edward Drumgoole Sims. In fact, the college's very name is derived from its location. John Randolph and Nathaniel Macon were the congressmen from the Virginia and North Carolina adjoining districts where the college was located and where it had its great base of support. The events leading to Randolph-Macon's foundings commenced with the General Conference of the Methodist Church in 1824. At that session, the conference recommended that regional conferences establish colleges. The Virginia Conference, meeting in 1825 at Oxford, North Carolina, in adjacent Granville County, appointed a committee of 6 clergy and 6 laymen to consider and report the best method for establishing a college in the conference. When 2 prominent Boydtonians, Colonel William Towns, the proprietor of the Boyd Tavern, and attorney Edward R. Chambers, persuaded the conference education committee meeting at Zion Methodist Church at Union level between Boydton and South Hill to recommend that the college be established in Mecklenburg County. The Virginia Conference meeting in Lynchburg adopted the recommendation of its education committee, and so it was that William O. Good from Mecklenburg, a member of the legislature, drafted the bill that resulted in the legislature granting the charter for Randolph-Macon College in February of 1830. The college was located in Mecklenburg County partly because the founders believed that a rural setting removed from the potentially corrupting influences and distractions often associated with metropolitan areas would not be present. Another key factor was that the Virginia-North Carolina-Piedmont border area was the geographical center of the old Virginia Conference, which at that time was bounded roughly by a line running from Fredericksburg south to Newbern, west to about Statesville, and north to Charlottesville before running back east again to Fredericksburg. The location was fixed at Boydton after Mecklenburg County outbid rival Brunswick County with money and a deeply discounted price on prime real estate located about 1 mile west of the town of Boydton. Influential persons in this decision were William O. Good, the local legislator who drafted the college charter, William Towns, proprietor of the Boyd Tavern and son-in-law of Boydton's founder Alexander Boyd, who owned the New Market racetrack property on which the college's main building and Stewart's Hall were constructed. A key leader within the conference clergy ranks was the Reverend Hezekiah Lee of Petersburg, who Richard Irby's history recounts was the prime mover of the college enterprise. Another very influential clergyman from the beginning was John Early, chairman of the college's board of trustees throughout the entire Boydton era, and a Methodist bishop later in his career. Another was William A. Smith, who later became president of the college and led it to the zenith of its operation during the Boydton period. Finally, there was Howell Taylor, an influential conference layman and member of a pioneer Mecklenburg County Methodist family, whose entire family had been converted to Methodism by the legendary circuit rider Francis Asbury decades before, and who operated Taylor's Ferry, a prime crossing on the Roanoke River about 7 miles south of Boydton, leading into North Carolina. The land to build the college was assembled from 4 sizable tracts, ultimately totaling over 400 acres. Erection of the necessary buildings, including housing for the trustees and guests, academic and administration use, student residences, and their dependencies, was a daunting task and was accomplished within about 24 months from the college's charter. The goal was to meet the fall of 1832 opening date, and this was done with about a month's delay. To do this, 4 general contractors were employed with a labor force of between 50 and 100, an enormous undertaking in rural Virginia at that time. The property on which the buildings were erected was located on the eastern portion of the 400 acres, the part nearest the town of Boydton. Today, this area has not changed a lot, except that there are a number of roads in the area which were not there in 1832. In fact, only one of the roads that is in the area now was in the property in 1832. 4-lane U.S. Highway 58, which now splits the old campus, was rerouted to this location in 1941, and the second set of lanes was added about 10 years ago. You will note that the entire area where the buildings were erected is a nearly level high plateau which rises to an elevation higher than the town of Boydton. This made the main building, with its tall 4 stories and beautiful octagonal cupola crowning it on the center section, visible on the horizon from a long distance. Indeed, a very impressive sight. All of the buildings were laid out on a master plan to face the main building. This is the building which is best known to Randolph-Macon alumni due to its long use as the centerpiece of the college seal. This gives you a brief background on Randolph-Macon's founding and its location. We are now standing to the south of, facing the front of the original main building, and the remains before you only hint of the splendor of its original appearance when it was still intact. The entire east wing no longer exists, having crumbled into dust some years ago. The portion to the far right is actually the center section, and the left portion beyond that is the western wing of the original building. So the east wing, which no longer exists, was identical to and the same size of the west wing that you see still standing. The building was 4 floors high and was topped by a beautiful octagonal cupola which held the original college bell. Incidentally, that college bell was given by the Board of Trustees to the local Methodist church and still hangs in the steeple of the Methodist church in Boydton. When this building was completed, it was the largest building between Petersburg and Raleigh. Its size, even today, astounds those who see it for the first time. The building was lengthened from its original plan of 115 feet to 187 feet so that it would be identical in length to Cushing Hall at Hampton, Sydney, which was then under construction. Contrast this building to Thomas Jefferson's designed State Capitol in Richmond, which is 54 feet shorter in length than the original Randolph-Macon building. Not until the 1970s was there a building on the Ashland campus to rival the size of the main building in Boydton. The 4-story western building, which was perpendicular to the west wall of the west wing of the main building that you see in the old lithograph made about 1860, was added in 1834 with the same architectural style to be a dormitory only. The eastern and western wings of the main building were all residence, and most of the center building, with a few exceptions, was academic and administration. The chapel, the main gathering point for assemblies and worship services, was located on the north side of the center section on the first floor. It had pine pews with a balcony at the rear, and the roof and the balcony were supported by solid tree trunks that had their bark stripped and painted white. The graduation exercises were held here in mid-June over a 2-day period, and there was worship here each Sunday, which was also attended by and was used as a place of worship for the local Boydton Methodist congregation. The residence rooms were clustered around 4 staircases like a modern townhouse plan. Each room had a fireplace for heat, and students were expected to use and furnish 2 cords of wood annually. This is part of the reason that the college owned 400 acres of land to supply all of that wood. All of the activity connected with the college occurred in this building except dining. Dining was held at Stewart's Hall and also at a number of private boarding houses in the community which fed the students. The Washington and Franklin Literary Society halls or rooms were located on the 3rd and 4th floors of the center building on the northeast side. Founded in 1833, these colleges within a college were the center of student life and provided social bonding and support in addition to academic and debating society outlets. They had extensive libraries, even more complete in many ways than the college's library. The large, beautiful portrait of George Washington, which hangs in Washington Franklin Hall on the Ashland campus, was made by a prominent New York artist in about 1834 from subscriptions taken by members of the Washington Literary Society given to President Olin, who contracted the painting to be done on a business trip to New York by a prominent artist in New York at that time. That portrait hung in the Washington Literary Society Hall in Boydton for the rest of the Boydton era. The college library, chemistry laboratory, and all of the administration offices were also located in the so-called center section or center building of the main building. What was it like to be a student at Randolph-Macon in Boydton? Well, it was a very small operation. The physical facilities were constructed to house not more than 200 students, and they hardly ever exceeded more than about 150 or 160. The great majority of them came from Virginia and North Carolina, with a number from South Carolina and Georgia. These 4 states represented practically the entire student body, and all 4 states were represented on the college's board of trustees. Rules for college attendance included being in attendance at prayers in the college chapel in the morning and the evening in, quote, with decency and composure in conduct, close quote. On Sunday, students were required to attend public preaching in the chapel unless parents not of the Methodist persuasion had designated by letter another place of worship not further than the town of Boydton, which at that time meant either Boydton Presbyterian Church or St. James Episcopal Church. Independent of wood, candles, and bedding for the 1848 academic year were, from August through December, board $8 a month, tuition and deposit fee $22.50. For the January through June session, board was $80 and tuition and deposit fee $45. The faculty consisted of 5 men, including the president who also taught, and several adjunct professors. Judge Edward Chambers, who was then a practicing attorney in Boydton, as the professor of law. Randolph-Macon, a pioneer alma mater, and her offspring. From the beginnings at Boydton and later maturation here, ultimately grew 5 institutions known as the Randolph-Macon system: Randolph-Macon College, Randolph-Macon Women's College, the 2 Randolph-Macon Academies in Bedford and Front Royal, and Randolph-Macon Institute in Danville. Moreover, over a dozen Methodist-related colleges in Virginia and North Carolina trace their spiritual antecedents to this place. However, in the last analysis, a college is an entity in which the generations are knit each to each. Randolph-Macon students and faculty who lived, shared, and bonded at Boydton included many notable persons. For example, the second president, Landon Garland, was later the longtime chancellor of Vanderbilt University in Nashville. His infant son is buried in the college cemetery here at Boydton. Another notable graduate was John Granberry, valedictorian of the class of 1848, well known as the fighting chaplain of the Confederacy, and later a prominent Methodist bishop. Samuel Lander, whom we have already met, valedictorian of the class of 1852, was the founder of Lander College in Greenwood, South Carolina. Another prominent educator was Richard Watson Jones, class of 1857, and the founding president of Mississippi College for Women in Columbus, Mississippi. And 2 roommates, David Clopton and Robert Lanier of Georgia. Clopton, valedictorian of the class of 1840, represented the Montgomery, Alabama area in the United States and Confederate States Congresses, and thereafter for many years was an associate justice on the Supreme Court of Alabama. Robert Lanier of Macon, who along with Burwell Harrison married late as they met while at Randolph-Macon, was the father of Sidney Lanier, the famed poet laureate of the South. College years and the associations formed during this time between youth and adulthood and the enabling institution are among the most cherished events in a person's life, and no place is more special than the birthplace in Boydton of America's oldest continuous Methodist college. Several persons have asked, why are we trying to preserve the main building in Boydton, and what are the plans for doing so? One of the first questions asked was, how did the building deteriorate to its present state of disrepair? The answer is that the owner of the property for many years lived in a distant state, and he did not make the property available for acquisition until recently. As soon as it became known that this property might be able to be acquired, the Old Brunswick Circuit Foundation, the Methodist Heritage Preservation Organization in Southern Virginia, entered into negotiations with him which have resulted in the purchase of the property by the foundation in the spring of 2009. What are the plans for this property? Well, the first stage is to obtain the necessary funds needed to pay off the bridge loan which had to be acquired in order to exercise the option to purchase within the time period permitted. Then the following phase that is anticipated is stabilization of the existing brick walls to hold in place what remains of this remarkable structure. Structural engineers who've recently examined this property tell us that these walls appear to be solid and they can design a metal apparatus and framework that will hold them in place. Once these structures have been accomplished, then the plan is to clear the grounds of all of this underbrush and undergrowth and erect a protective barrier around the big walls, and then develop an interpretive tour which would be self-guided and facilitate the story of Randolph-Macon's heritage here, and also the heritage of the several African-American institutions that operated here beginning shortly after the college relocated to Ashland, and in addition lay out a nature and hiking trail on the more than 12 acres of land that came with the acquisition of the main building and the frame structure adjacent to it, which is associated with the African American institutions. Later phases could involve some selective reconstruction of the main building, dependent on feasibility and cost. How can I participate in this effort to preserve this priceless piece of Randolph-Macon and early American pioneer Methodist heritage work? You can do so by contacting alumni and friends who you think may be interested in this subject but who don't know about the project, and also by assisting with financial aid and endorsements of the work. If everyone would contact one, this would be a great way to make this project the successful venture that it needs to be done. More information about this project can be obtained by contacting alumnus Jack Russell at area code 804-355-0100. Contributions can be directed to the Randolph-Macon Boydton Fund in care of the Old Brunswick Circuit Foundation, P.O. Box 385, Lawrenceville, Virginia, 23868, to the attention of Glenn Johnson, Treasurer.